Welcome to day 13 of the 21 Days of Prayer podcast. I'm Jamie, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not Matthew. Matthew's been hosting and leading every one of these, and now it's me. And hey, I'm excited because over these days, you've seen and heard from different members of REVO Church, different staff members, elders, a student of REVO. And so now today I'm joined by our expert on day 13, who is none other than the man, the myth, the legend, the host of the 21 Days of Prayer podcast.
He didn't even call me co-host. Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah.
The official guy.
It's good. This couch, I think, is a little bit more comfortable than that chair. So I'm enjoying it. It
the
feels
light
good
shines
to sit
a
on
little
this
bit
side.
differently over there.
Yeah,
it's a different world.
Hopefully, making all my imperfections nice and obvious
you're
from this
beautiful.
side.
Don't you worry.
Thank you.
So day 13 of the podcast was about serving others. And so I'm just curious, Matthew, like when you wrote on the topic of serving others and serving, how was it that you were able to connect it with prayer?
Yeah, because like we've said for so many of the other days that we've had that I've sat in that chair and said, those things don't really obviously connect on the surface. And yet serving out of the strength that we have is just so hard. It's really hard to wake up every day and have the servant-hearted, servant-minded lifestyle that Jesus lived. And so to walk worthy in that sense, it's really hard to do that. It's going to drain us, take a lot out of us. And so that's where prayer comes in, because prayer is kind of the fuel source that will fill us up to enable us to then pour out for the rest of the day. It's going to be the thing that empowers us to serve. And so it really changes things when you're realizing I'm no longer taking what Matthew can offer and then giving it to the rest of the world. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my heart right. I'm going to pray first thing in the morning, start my day out with prayer so that I'm then filled up with God's strength, with his power, his spirit to then pour that out to other people. There's a great quote that, and I'm about to butcher because I don't know it well enough. It's by a guy named George Mueller, who was I guess you could call him a theologian or pastor of some sort, but he ran an orphanage in England a couple hundred years ago. And he said that the first job that he has every morning, though he had this orphanage with hundreds of kids in it, and he had all these duties and tasks, he wrote books and all this kind of stuff. I mean, imagine, like, I see parents of 2 or 3 kids, and I'm like, how do they do all of this? He had hundreds. And yet he said the number one thing he needed to do when he started his day was to make his soul happy in God. And if he didn't do that, then the rest of his day would be a nightmare. Yet he had all these tasks. He's like, first things first. Gotta get my soul happy in God. So that's what I view prayer as, and how that involves serving, is that it's about getting our souls happy in the Lord, being filled up first, so that then we can go serve and pour out for the rest of the day.
I like that. So talk to us for a second. You had serving, and we talked, your day was Mark chapter 10, where it talks about how Jesus was not called to be served, but to serve. And then you also had the passage in the book of Acts, which I'm sure all of our people, again, they're like, oh man, the book of Acts, like just not getting away from it. But talk to us for a second about how those two passages connects and how it talks about serving.
I think the Acts passage was actually the most difficult for me. When you've got the topic of serving that you said was mine. You gave me the 2 passages. Yeah. Well, Mark 10's easy. It says literally, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. It's like, okay.
Super simple.
Easy. Of course, that's how that connects with service. But then in Acts 27, I'm reading that going, what in the heck? And I guess this is just a great, way to glorify God and just say, how many sermons have our people heard on Acts? And yet so many of these 21 days of prayer has stuff from Acts in it. It just shows like God's word is the stuff that it has for us is endless. So we can keep pulling stuff out of it. Cause I preached 2 sermons on Acts 27. I preached Acts 27, then Acts 28. And then the very next week when we did our next series, I was in Acts 27 again. And here I am in January doing Acts 27. And yet what it was challenging to figure out what is Paul doing that's serving these people. And I'm realizing what he was doing was in verse 35 specifically, he prays and he eats some food and he gives this food to other people because he said in verse 33 that, hey, we've got to eat. Like we haven't eaten in days. We've been fighting this storm. We got to have our own strength. And what he was doing is before he ate the food that would give him the physical strength, he hadn't eaten in days.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine how tired.
Days.
You're fighting this storm with your life at risk, literally at risk on this boat with these sailors, and you haven't eaten in days. Like, how hungry? Right now I'm hungry, and I haven't only eaten in a couple hours, and all I've done is sit in a chair. You know, it's like, I can't imagine how hungry they must have been. But before he ate, he prayed. And he said, before, it's almost like the George Mueller quote, you know, before I do anything else, I want to make sure my soul is happy in God. I want to make sure I'm right with God. I want to be with God first. And so to have that mindset and realize the way he's serving those people is by pointing them to the God who is, as Jesus said, the bread of life. Before he gives them bread to eat, he's like, let me give you the bread of life. Before I give you this food that will make you stronger for a moment, let me point you to the one who can make you strong all the time. And so that seeing that connection in service was really cool for me. I loved seeing that in Acts 27.
No, that's really good. So I want to ask you this question with your day, because we're talking about serving and serving others. And I love the connection of that passage. I almost laughed when you had Acts 27, because you did preach on it.
Yeah, twice.
Preach 28, preach 27. And then I'm like, here you go, Matthew, you get Acts 27.
Yep.
I hope you really learn this passage.
Yeah.
The Lord's speaking to you somehow. But I would love for you to just take a second and talk about how, with this day in mind, with serving others and what it is, how has that helped to maybe reinforce your prayer life, or help to, in another sense, like change the way you think about prayer, change the way that you are praying?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would think that for me, it goes along a lot of the lines that I've just been talking about, in the sense that there's a lot of things that I need, a lot of things that I have to do. I've got a wonderful blessing of being a pastor, but because as a pastor, you have to try and do things with people.
Yeah.
And so you're not pastoring a building, you're pastoring a church, meaning people. And so you've got to get the people to do certain things, live certain ways maybe. And so it'd be really easy to just spend all your prayer time asking God to help people.
Yeah.
Or, a lot of my past couple weeks have been spent doing pastoral care stuff for people who are hurting and suffering. It's like, God, I need you to comfort these people. And so it'd be really easy. And it is, it's not just would be, let's not, get out of hypotheticals. It is really easy for me to focus my prayer life only on asking God for what I need, or for the needs of others, and coming to God because I've got to have his help. Or even like in good things where I'm saying, I really want people to experience Jesus for themselves through this sermon that I'm writing. And so what I'm praying is that God would use this message to really speak to someone else. And all I'm still doing is just asking God for stuff. Even though it's a heart thing, it's a spiritual thing, like all this stuff, I'm asking God for stuff. And so what this idea of serving does is it really changes the way that I've thought about prayer, because it has helped me to see, all right, get that reminder. I need that reminder over and over of I need to go to God in prayer for me to fill up.
Yeah.
Like for me to have God pour his spirit into my life, for God to do this great work in me before I'm asking God to do some great work for somebody else, or for me in some other way. But to really think to myself, first things first, I've got to have my soul happy in God. I've got to have my soul right with the Lord. And so just thinking as it comes to prayer, like I've got to pray for Matthew's sake.
Yeah.
Not for God's sake, not for somebody else's sake, but first things first, I've got to pray for Matthew's sake, because if not, I'm going to be a hot mess. And so, having that as the mindset going into it of what can I receive from God in prayer today?
Yeah, I think that's good. And the last question before we wrap up here, just take a second and challenge the readers, challenge the listeners, like from reading about serving, from studying the idea of if we are to walk worthy of our calling, we are to serve. Just give the people a challenge of like, what's their next step that they can take to start serving?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a million great opportunities to volunteer your time, to serve in different ways, all these sorts of things. But I don't even want to focus on any of those because I think those are good. But if done with the wrong heart, like, man, we're going to be hurting. And we're not going to last long, and we're actually going to negatively impact the people that we're trying to serve, because in trying to serve them with the wrong heart, we're actually hurting them instead of helping them. So I would say that the next step, the challenge, is to serve not out of Jamie's strength or Matthew's strength or your strength, but instead to serve out of God's strength. If I had 3 pages to write on this, I would have absolutely included one of my favorite verses in the Bible, 1 Peter 4:10 and 11, where Paul says that the one who serves should serve by the strength that God supplies, not the strength that we can supply, but the strength that God supplies. And that he then says, is how God gets glory, is that he gives strength to weak, needy people like me, so that then I can go and serve other people. And then when other people are thankful for the service that I've done for them, or the way that I've helped them, I can point them back to, it wasn't in my strength. I don't have enough strength for this, but God does. So that would be my next step today, is to think about the way that you can go to God to be filled up with his strength, so then you can go serve others, not in the strength that you supply, but in the strength that God so graciously supplies.
Wow, I love that, man. I think that was great. Matthew, I just appreciate you being on the podcast.
It's great to be in this chair.
Not just hosting, but being on it. You got to switch sides. But man, I appreciate that. This has been day 13 of our 21 days of prayer podcast and reading. And so, church, I pray that this has been a blessing for you. I pray that throughout these 13 days and the next 8 days.
14, 8, it's all the same.
Hey, it's all the same. Math is not my strong suit. But my prayer is through these past 13 and the next 8, that you would allow this moment to see, hey, what is God calling me to? What should I be doing? And that you'll allow it to spark a revolution of life change, not just in your heart, but in your life. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.